At all stages of human life, learning is a continuous process essential for obtaining and developing new knowledge and skills. Educational institutions including kindergartens, elementary schools, high schools, colleges, and universities are easily recognized as the heart of the significant human activity. Nonetheless, like any other undertaking, people in the academe face mountains of struggles in their venture for education. A particular hindrance they are reported to experience is the trouble to retain the large amount of data they regularly acquire in their classes. Memory is a complementary concept of learning defined as the persistence of acquired information in a state that can be revealed at a later time. The earliest link between learning and memory can be traced back to German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus, as he noted that forgetting is almost immediately the nemesis of memory because it causes information previously stored in short-term or long-term memory to be lost or altered. To affirm his work on this, Ebbinghaus pioneered the forgetting curve, a model that shows the exponential decline of memory over time due to the absence of effort in retaining it. As such, approximately 56% of learned material is forgotten after 1 hour, 66% after 1 day, and a whopping 75% after 6 days. Regardless of the fact that a few consider memorization as a main objective of education, Ebbinghaus's discovery is still an alarming matter. In actuality, it holds great relevance because the ability to amass foundational knowledge and to later access them from memory is often fundamental for higher-order learning and reasoning. So, how does one combat the forgetting curve and enhance retention? Kayla de la Cruz is a grade 12 researcher who has taken an interest in a strategy that enhances learning through the scientific aspect of human memory. Several months ago, they began conducting a study entitled Stemming the Forgetting Curve: The Effects of Space Retrieval Practice on the Retention of Grade 12 Students of the College of the Holy Spirit of Turlock. Hundreds of studies over a century of research have revealed that the key to successful learning revolves more on how time spent studying is scheduled. Relative to this, an easy and effective approach to making learning stick was devised and has emerged as spaced practice, a condition wherein students study in multiple sessions according to a certain schedule spread over time. This can be compared to the more conventional approach of mass practice cramming, characterized by students learning in one long and continuous session. It is usually combined with retrieval practice, wherein learned information is forcibly pulled out from the mind, thus strengthening its memory. Altogether, the merger of the spacing and the testing effect from the respective learning methods results in what is called space retrieval practice, a simple technique that helps students learn better. Together with her group mates Andre Jimenez, Gwyneth Pascual, Marie Ana Lugay, and Paul Suarez, they detailed their study meaningfully through 5 research chapters. Chapter 1 consists of 6 parts known as the introduction, statement of the problem, hypothesis, significance of the study, scope and delimitation, and definition of terms.
For the introduction, we confirm that there really is a need for effective learning methods, especially in countries like the Philippines, wherein the education crisis is palpable and daunting. Recent pedagogical researches utilizing space retrieval practice show promising outcomes as students exposed to space retrieval practice performed better than those subjected to the traditional mode of teaching. This led to the formulation of our aim to discern the impact of space retrieval practice on the retention of the grade 12 high school STEM students of the College of the Holy Spirit of Turlock during the academic year 2021 to 2022. The particular questions our study seeks to answer are the following. Subsequently, our hypotheses were derived from our statement of the problem. Again, the central objective of conducting this study was to explore space retrieval practice and retention pertinent to the grade 12 STEM students of CHST during the academic year 2021 to 2022. We then drew conclusions and implications from the findings that may be significant for policy, practice, or theory. Overall, this study aimed to make ample contributions to the field of cognitive science and education. The investigation was only administered within the bounds of CHST. Particularly, only grade 12 students taking up the STEM program participated in this study. Other grade levels and strands were excluded as they do not fit the criteria that correspond to the objective of the paper. Furthermore, we only ascertained the respondents' retention on biology through the utilization of mass and space retrieval practices. No other courses or learning strategies were involved in this experiment. In addition, both groups were given an equal amount of study time with only their schedules varying. We also monitored them via Zoom call and Google Slides throughout the whole process. Moreover, the variables of this research were quantified and analyzed through pre-test and post-test scores. This design allowed for the comparison of the two study techniques along with the determining of effectiveness of space retrieval practice on retention. Lastly, we've also defined some terms conceptually and operationally like forgetting curve, mass practice, post-test, pre-test, retention, space retrieval practice, STEM, and test scores or scores to ensure clarity and understanding in the research.
In Chapter 2, previously composed and conducted literature and studies were presented to contribute to the significance of the research. Together with this are the conceptual and theoretical frameworks of the study.
First, let's delve into the review of related literature, where in summary, it is established that memorization is an effective indicator of high intelligence. The reason for this occurrence is the holistic capability of the brain to retain essential information. As space retrieval practice is regarded to improve memory retention, it is also stated that it encourages understanding. This method exercises the brain in order for it to identify gaps in learning as the space or lag introduced in the development of educational settings. This method is recommended for a wide range of people, including different ages and disciplines. With those in place, let's move on to the review of foreign studies. To put an emphasis on the importance of combating the forgetting curve, the researchers explored its relationship with memory and a method to overcome it. A study proposed that the nearly identical replication of the process used by Ebbinghaus has proven the memory drop in retention over time. His theories in the modern times have been substantiated by this study, supporting his breakthroughs along with his noted errors. The alternative learning and study method called space retrieval practice was found to have a potency to increase memory retention in a neuroscience and academic setting. In essence, the preceding studies led to the discovery of the benefit of space retrieval practice. However, the current study focuses on the implementation of this method as a study technique comparable to the traditional mass practice. A gap of knowledge entails in the pool of respondents as the current study focuses on grade 12 STEM strand students with biology concepts. Moving on to the studies in a local setting, where the students tackled mathematics that similarly observed the advantages space retrieval practice has, as the complexity of the mathematics program inclines students to progress slowly but significantly in the subject. Providing insights on a similar method, the studies explored the spiral progression approach that leads the students into achieving increased memory retention, collaborative, and creative thinking. Especially in biology, this technique is student-centered and already implemented in the K-12 curriculum program in the Philippines. However, the discrepancy of the subjects utilized for mathematics is a number-centered course and biology anchors on worded topics. Spiral progression tends to be a teaching strategy rather than a student's self-learning strategy. With all this discussed, the work of a 19th century German psychologist serves as our theoretical framework. Namely, Hermann Ebbinghaus in which he conducted a series of tests on himself to better understand how memory operates. He was able to reach a conclusion that the ability of the brain to retain memory decreases over time, whereas he made a graphic representation of his exploration that shows dropping lines that peak but later fell that signifies the level of memory retention. This figure is the visual representation of the study or the conceptual framework that will identify the process and relationship between variables. This illustrates that the procedure to be followed in the collection and interpretation of data from the two groups. Pretest will discern the baseline knowledge of students that will help the production of the learning materials that will be later studied by the students. Both groups will have a different method in studying, where the experimental group will be instructed to implement space retrieval practice by having short and frequent learning sessions and practicing retrieval by flashcards. On the other hand, the control group will be advised to exercise mass practice by having long and compact learning sessions and crammed studying in learning the studying materials. Following this, post-tests will be given to the respondents to examine their retention after the intervention was applied. Ultimately, the difference between the two groups' retention will be compared and analyzed alongside their pretest scores.
Chapter 3 encapsulates the methods and procedures that the researchers utilized to fulfill the objectives of this study, particularly the research design, respondents of the study, research instruments, validation of the instrument, data gathering procedures, statistical treatment, and ethical considerations were exhibited in this section.
A true experimental pretest post-test control group design was used as this is regarded as the most accurate with the cause and effect relationship. Following this design, the researchers made use of random sampling and categorized the respondents into the experimental and control group. Afterward, pretest while applying treatment and post-test that best correspond to the aim of the study were utilized. In essence, this design is an in-depth investigation of the effects and effectiveness of treatment and provides higher validity to be used by the future researchers. The respondents of the study were 60 grade 12 science, technology, engineering, and mathematics students of the College of the Holy Spirit of Tarlac. This is because they take the course biology that needs memorization, and it is deemed difficult because of the large amount of information they need to learn. On the whole, STEM students must retain a lot of knowledge in order to succeed under this strand. The research instrument we utilize is the Graduate Record Examination Biology Practice Book from Educational Testing Service Organization. This organization has a standardized exam and review materials. It is a standardized 30-item multiple-choice test that covers evolution topics in accordance with the Department of Education's curriculum. Furthermore, it was meticulously inspected by Mr. William Manyo, a biology teacher, Mr. Benjamin Lacamada, a science teacher, and Dr. Monica Luis Estrada, a medical doctor in Tarlac Provincial Hospital, in order to validate and improve the questionnaires before we applied them to the grade 12 STEM students. Elaborating on the data gathering procedure, we first asked for permission to perform the research in CHST to the administration and faculty through formal letters. As soon as we received the consent to conduct the study, we began collecting data from the grade 12 STEM students through Google Forms, Google Slides, and Zoom. Specifically, a pretest was given to both groups for 45 minutes for the first week. After the pretest, the respondents received a modular study material based on the GRE Biology Practice Book. We followed a 1-week plan with 3 20-minute learning sessions and a 1-day spacing gaps between the said class meetings for the group instructed with space retrieval practice. On the contrary, the other group proceeded with the conventional way of learning known as mass practice, wherein there was only an hour learning session. The following week, post-tests that are similar yet modified from the pre-test and learning materials were issued to both groups. After the final testing date, we have shown appreciation to everyone involved, then turned into the statistician for supervision in interpreting and examining the accumulated data. Notably so, ethical considerations such as proper authorization, health safety, data privacy, anonymity, and confidentiality were observed in this procedure.
Following for the statistical treatment, we consulted with the statistician and we were advised to utilize the t-test for 2 independent means. The formula is as follows. Through this, we were able to compute the t-value of the pre-test and post-test scores in both the space retrieval practice and mass practice group. The study examined the effects of space retrieval practice on the retention of grade 12 STEM students. The t-value was computed, analyzed, and interpreted using social science statistics and Microsoft Excel, while Google Sheets was also utilized to collect and encode all of the data collected from the respondents.
The analysis and interpretation of the shred of evidence gathered corresponding to the data procedures and statistical treatment in the previous section are presented in Chapter 4. The findings were delineated as a statement of the problem was answered explicitly and empirically.
The differences between the retention of the two groups in terms of their pretest scores is as follows. The results indicate that there is no significant difference between the retention of the respondents who use mass practice and the respondents who use space retrieval practice in terms of their pretest scores. In simpler terms, the retention of the respondents at the beginning is comparable as they are similar levels. One that may be attributed to the results is that the topic in the pretest has not been incorporated or tackled yet in their classroom discussions. Furthermore, this also implies that the considered control variables before the conduction of the study were accurately and adequately utilized. Together with this, it entails that in the mass practice and space retrieval practice groups, the random distribution was of equal chance. As such, this is necessary to ascertain that the material is unfamiliar so that the learners can have approximately the same baseline knowledge as they study. The differences between the retention of the two groups in terms of their post-test scores is as follows. The data obtained suggests that there is no significant difference between the retention of the respondents who use mass practice and the respondents who use space retrieval practice in terms of their post-test scores. Undoubtedly, the two groups of the participants showed identical retention despite having different treatments. There are potential obstacles that students can encounter when establishing space retrieval practice, wherein they may feel that learning is slow and ineffective, may have difficulty with the organized schedule, and may have simply not used space retrieval practice by themselves, overall influencing the efficacy of the said learning strategy. Furthermore, the application of space retrieval practice can be challenged if the spacing interval between the learning sessions is not optimal. Considerable loss of retention could have occurred because of wide spacing, or it could not have been enough to stimulate adequate mental effort.
For the implication of the study, as students anchor their learning with the study strategies that they employ, the identification of groups for their development to promote memory retention is essential. The results of the study showed the improvement of both the mass and space practice groups coordinately. Therefore, both of them have significant effectiveness in memory retention. The major contributions of this study are directed towards educational policies for teachers and the learners themselves. The identification and consideration of a variety of study techniques can help the learners to accustom to a specific strategy that is most effective.
The summary, conclusion, and recommendations of the research are presented in Chapter 5 in order to review and verify the findings of the study. Specifically, the discoveries of the study in a generalized form can be seen in the summary of the findings, the synthesis of key points can be observed in the conclusion, and the particular solutions and measures on the basis of the research data are visible on the recommendations.
Moving on, the conclusion of the study are as follows. Most of the mass practice respondents are initially unacquainted with the biology topic, making the retention of baseline knowledge at the same level. Without intervention, the students under mass practice displayed great and heightened retention of the information they have learned as they utilize the aforementioned learning method, establishing it as efficient and effective. Participants in the space retrieval practice group exhibited unfamiliarity with the biology material at the beginning. Hence, their degree of understanding and retention is very much alike. After the intervention was applied, those in the space retrieval practice group showed immense and increased retention as they instrumentalized the said study technique, proving that it is competent and successful. There is no significant difference between the retention of the respondents who use mass practice and the respondents who use space retrieval practice with reference to their pretest scores. Thus, the students from the two groups have identical knowledge of the biology matter at the preliminary period because the majority of them have not encountered it in their past discussions. With regards to their post-test scores, there is no significant difference between the retention of both groups. A possible cause for this is the customization of the traditional method of mass practice for the control group. On the other hand, the experimental group adapted easily with the space retrieval method. Nonetheless, both strategies effectively improved the memory retention of the students. The major significant impacts of the findings are inclined toward educational policies. With the identification and utilization of the most effective strategy for the learners, their study preferences will be more accustomed. Consequently, the learners have a need to identify their personal learning techniques due to the strategies having similar effectiveness.
Lastly, the recommendations are as follows. Teachers or implementers should follow the national curriculum of DepEd to ascertain that all STEM students are at the same level in terms of knowledge and learning. In addition, teachers or implementers are urged to also investigate their STEM learners more to know which study approach, such as space retrieval practice, is suitable for them in both the short and long term. STEM students are encouraged to listen well in their class discussions and stimulation of similar contexts for them to reach comparable understanding and education with one another. Furthermore, STEM students are encouraged to know which learning method is more effective and efficient for them in the preservation of memory, not only for a short period of time, but a long one like space retrieval practice. Apart from this, STEM students are prompted to follow directions and suggestions teachers and implementers are to set for their successful learning. Curriculum planners and strategy makers should explore various learning techniques, especially space retrieval practice, to fathom out which is more apt for the longer retention of information. Future researchers should investigate more on space retrieval practice as they specify proper steps and guidelines in implementing it. Additionally, they should explore it in the context of STEM subjects. To a large extent, this will ascertain the truth in order to determine the effectiveness of the learning method and contribute the findings of the study has yielded.